Often Jesus went off by himself to pray, dismiss the disciples, as he does in this account here from Matthew. Because Jesus knows that his grounding, of course, Jesus is God, the ground of all being, but it's that unity with the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. The love in particular between the Father and the Son, which St. Thomas Aquinas tells us, that love is the Holy Spirit. So he's there to be grounded and also to witness to us, to give example, as it's often recorded, that we're called to be grounded in the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit in prayer, making time for prayer, even in, especially in difficult times, but not just asking for things, but just being with God, being mindful that we are called to be with God, to spend time in communion with God. So it's praise, worship, thanksgiving. But then, as he comes out on the waters, it's also another teaching on the part of the early church as the Gospels are formed to show us who Jesus is as the Son of God with command over the waters. And we saw this, and the first listeners would have made these connections automatically, but in the beginning, at the very beginning of the book of the Bible, the book of Genesis, in the beginning, the earth was a formless void. There was just wind and which hovered over the waters. But the wind, the ruah, the Spirit, said, let there be light, and started to create and brought order to the chaos and created boundaries for the waters. So that's to remind us that's what God does. God has dominion over nature, and here we see Jesus manifest that. It was God who was called upon by Moses when the Israelites were desperate on the edge of the Red Sea and were being hunted down by the Egyptians, the most powerful nation on earth, with their army and their chariots and charioteers. And God, who has command over nature and the waters, divided the Red Sea, and of course they passed through safely. So those images of water and God's providence and God's power are to point us to Jesus. Here he is, comfortably walking across the water, fearless, and chastises his disciples for being filled with fear. Do not be afraid, O you of little faith. The other thing that we see in this, again, prayer, and then recognizing who Jesus is, he is God, he has dominion, is now we see St. Peter, who, in this little declaration of faith, if you are the Son of God, call me to walk across the water. And he does so. Jesus beckons him, come, and Peter steps out and walks just as Jesus did. But where Peter starts to falter is when he takes his eyes off Christ and starts to notice more of the problems, the storm, the wind and the waves, and worry again, then he starts to sink. But had he kept his eyes focused on Christ, again, he would have found his way there safely. But Jesus still rescues him when he calls out to him. So we have this. Jesus witnesses prayer. He witnesses dominion. But he also asks us to trust in him completely. So he's not saying if we trust Jesus, we won't have storms. No. We'll have storms. That's just part of human life. We're going to have problems. We'll have difficulties. We'll have tumultuous times personally, as a church, as a nation, our families. But we are called to remember who Jesus is, to stay grounded in prayer, trust in the divine one who comes to save us, and to keep our sights set on him. Even the good work that we do, the ministries that we're called to provide, those are all rooted not in our own doing, but in what Christ accomplishes in us. And so our church, even for all the great work we do, not just in difficult times, but also in good times, we're called to remember that it's only by Jesus that we're able to do this. Once we start thinking, I did all those good things, then we get into trouble. And that's why the prophets are so strong in Israel. They were reminding them who has dominion in their lives. So may we trust in the Lord, seek him always in prayer, and never take our eyes off him, because he's the one who's going to lead us to hope and freedom and strength, especially in tumultuous and stormy times.